Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I want to talk about another update on the 1600 gallon system. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bracing that's going on, but I'm also going to focus on some other things that have been going on in the system too. Before the bracing issue came up, I had gotten some other work done back there, and I really wanted to show everyone what's going on with it. Before we get into everything though, first I really want to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I surpassed 500 subscribers this week, and I just never really thought that I would be able to reach that number of subscribers. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all your support. I'm going to continue to provide weekly content on this build, along with all the ups and downs of it. So you can see this bracing here was a little bit of a setback, but that's part of this hobby, and that's why I'm doing this in part, is I want to show this stuff, let people understand that, you know, it always isn't as easy as it looks. There are challenges in this hobby, but they can be overcome with some ingenuity and hard work and taking advantage of the great community that's out there. I really also want to thank Rico's Reef community and Rico's Reef Tank channel. His live streams have been great. I've gotten a lot of great information and met a lot of great people on there. Also CJ's Aquarium. I've really been happy to be a part of those live streams, and thank you guys both for allowing me to be part of that community as well. So thank you. First thing I want to talk about today is the bracing for the 720 gallon tank. It's progressing well. I've got all three walls roughed up into their final construction. This is the back wall of the tank. It's cross braced, which I want to thank Bay Area Reefs for our discussion we had in my comments section in last week's video about cross bracing. I wasn't really sure if I was going to add it or not. I've been kind of hemming and hawing on it, and was going to do a little bit possibly, but I wasn't sure. And I gotta say, that conversation really helped to jumpstart me and just say, you know what, no, do full cross brace system on this whole thing. And that's what I did. Each one of these walls consists of a doubled up 2x4 in the center, and then 2x4 studs along the way. And I had to accommodate my drain line plumbing as well. So these walls then are going to get painted. If anyone knows me and been watching me for a while, they'll know that I really don't like painting, but it's got to be done. I wish I had a spray gun, but I don't, and I'm not going to buy one now. It's just a few more things to paint. That's where we stand with the bracing walls. They're going to get attached, and then I'll do a test fill on the tank to see if we get any bowing showing up before plumbing is reinstalled. From there, we're just going to take it one day at a time. Let me take you guys back into the fish room. We're going to talk about some other things that have been going on with this 1600 gallon system other than the bracing project for the 720 gallon tank. I want to talk about some of the other progress that's been made back in the fish room here on the 1600 gallon system. First thing I wanted to say, the outside air draw for this protein skimmer has been completed. I had a small grounding wire already going through for a satellite dish system that was in the home before I moved here. So I just expanded that hole a little bit, put a piece of 1/2 inch PEX through. It's capped off outside. Eventually it'll get an air filter and a carbon filter on it, but it has been completed so I could tube it over to the protein skimmer, which you'll notice the protein skimmer is here. And it's actually in the tank now. My last update video, it was sitting outside the tank and I was going through some final assembly with it. One of the other things I wanted to mention first before we talk about the protein skimmer is the Renko controller. Now, I talked about this just a little bit in the Heating with Fire series, as I'm not using a traditional heating system for this. I'm not using electric heaters. Instead, I'm using my hot water tank and a heat exchanger, which if you're not familiar with what I'm doing, check out my Heating with Fire series. I got a couple of videos on it that go through how I plumbed in a heating system using my hot water tank. I've yet to test this system fully, and I have the controller hooked up, which will control the recirculation pump of hot water through my heat exchanger. When I have both tanks filled and running again in one solid system, I'm then going to go ahead and kick this system on to let it go and see how quickly it can heat this whole tank up, and then also start to monitor to see how well it maintains temperature in the 1600 gallon system. I want to make sure it's not spiking temperatures or having any kind of difficulties in that way. There'll definitely be another whole series of videos coming to that Heating with Fire. Just gonna have to stay tuned until I get the bracing done and the tanks back in line. One of the other things I've been working on is I got the lighting for the refuge tank completed. It really was mounted before, where I just had a temporary plug on it that had a piece of Romex hooked up. I went ahead and I got a more permanent cord, hooked that up so now I can plug in both lights at the same time. I also bought a small little fan to put on here that just blows a little air across these lights. They do get rather hot. It's not necessary, and they're outdoor rated light fixtures that don't say they need to have any kind of air cooling. They have heat sinks built into them, but I figured it'd just be good to not allow a lot of heat to get trapped up here and just to kind of let it circulate through the room and get exhausted out. This part is now ready for an apex so that I can control the light and the fan. Now, one other thing here we want to talk about real quick before we go on to the protein skimmer status. A slight modification to the plumbing system has also been made. Now, originally when I talked about the plumbing for the 1600 gallon system, we have our main riser that comes up and is the return for the tank, but I also made a second riser here that allows me to put in a coral frag tank here, and I also put in another ball valve here that remains closed that goes to a pump out to my sewer line. And I had a comment that came in about that saying, you know, there could be some potential risk with it. And one of the risks with this was that as these valves are actuated, there was a chance of backwashing this water into my system. And to minimize that, this Y was installed with a 3/4 inch ball valve on it and some vinyl tubing. That way, before I am going to do a pump out and after I do a pump out, I can ensure that I can drain all the water in this one vertical riser, just to make sure the stagnant water doesn't have a chance of backwashing into my tank, along with any contaminants it might contain. With this extra piece of plumbing in place, I think it's going to even help further to minimize the risk potential of having a pump out system to a sewer like this. The protein skimmer. So this thing is finally into the sump. It has been set up to where water will flow through it. It accepts a full 2-inch line from the drain here off the 3-inch. I did weight this down. I used 4 cement blocks to weight down this whole thing. If they're not there, it will float. And I'm going to do more videos on the protein skimmer, so if you have some questions on it, please feel free to ask them in the comments down below, so that way I can address them when I get into some more in-depth videos on the protein skimmer. Until I get salt water in the tank, I'm not going to do too many in-depth videos on the protein skimmer because I want to put salt water in here and give everybody the chance to see how it actually works. And when I talk about that, I haven't tested this thing with salt water yet, so I want to see how my needle wheel functions, my bubble chamber functions, and what kind of foam we get out of this. I did finish a couple other items with this. I had another comment that came in on a video that talked about putting a gasket seal in on the big cup here. I did go ahead and do that. I added 2 more ring layers and I routed out one of them so that I could accommodate a gasket. Let's go ahead and zoom into that real quick. A comment came up where it was being asked, you know, you should put some kind of gasket in between the cup and these rings to prevent any kind of skimmer foam from coming out of here. Now, I had thought about this and I really just hadn't dealt with the issue yet, but that comment definitely jump-started me in thinking, you know what, let's get this done now. I did, though, however, run into a couple of issues. One, what kind of gasket material was I going to use? And 2, how was I going to make sure that it fit? Well, I came up with just making more rings, which was the most obvious choice for me since I've already been machining this plastic quite a bit with a router. But the gasket material definitely sent me for a little bit more of a thought process. This gasket material, well, I could go out and find gaskets that are custom to this size. I figured they're going to be a little more expensive. They might not be as easy to find. That made me think, well, what can we use in the aquarium hobby already that exists as a gasket? As it turns out, there was a material I could use pretty easily. Silicone airline tubing. I actually had some of this stuff sitting around and said, you know, this stuff's got a decent flexibility to it, a little bit of rigidity, actually make a pretty good gasket seal. I just needed to route it out properly so I could put it in there. I've gone ahead and done that. It doesn't have a perfect seal because it's just two ends butting together, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's going to work pretty good, I think, to get this skimmer sealed up. I'm going to definitely have to play with it a little bit once we get this thing running, and if needed I might put some little silicone spacers in it just to make sure it has a decent seal. But I think overall it's going to work really well for this skimmer. The final update I want to talk about a little bit with the protein skimmer is the lid. Now, the lid here is finally completed. It was just a flat top before. It didn't have holes drilled in it. I simply had a groove that would accommodate the cup behind me. One of the better design features of many skimmers is that as the foam comes up from the neck of the skimmer and hits the top of the cup, it gets deflected by a ring, so it gets pushed down into the cup and can't easily come out through the air holes in here. And that's why I made the rings the way I did. They're just below the neck so that anything that comes up has to deflect at least a little bit. I'll probably talk a little bit more about this in future videos on the protein skimmer, but that was one of the updates that I had completed and I wanted to talk about. Well, that wraps up today's video on the 1600 gallon system. I really hope everyone liked the video today. If you like it, please leave a like. If you disliked it, well, leave a dislike on it. Of course, if you have comments or questions on the 1600 gallon system, please leave them down below. I'll try to get to them as quick as I can. If you have questions on anything specific, such as the protein skimmer, the heating system, or the bracing for the 720 gallon tank, feel free to ask those questions. If I can't address them in the comments section, I'll probably address them right through a video. And as always, if you want to see more videos on the 1600 gallon system and its progress, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you on the next video.